There's something rare and powerful about presence. Yours. It has the ability to draw something out of people, to expose truths they didn't plan on revealing. And when someone starts to melt in your presence, when the facade begins to crack, it isn't because they're weak. It's because the emotional structure they've built to protect themselves is encountering something greater than their defenses. Watch them carefully. Not because you're trying to catch them in a lie, but because truth, especially the emotional kind, never lies in words. It slips through the cracks of control. It flashes across a face in a moment of softness they didn't approve. It slips out in the way they lean toward you when you speak, as though the distance between you is unbearable. There are people walking through this life armored to the teeth. They've learned often through pain to hide how they feel, to avoid vulnerability like it's a disease. But then you show up, and suddenly, all that control, it starts to weaken. You don't need to do anything. You don't need to dress a certain way or say the perfect thing. The very fact that you exist in their space creates a pressure they can't ignore. Emotional systems begin to short circuit. Pay attention to the micro expressions. The quick glance when you're not looking. The smile they try to suppress when you speak. The way their voice softens unexpectedly. These are not accidents. These are reflexes, reactions to something they can't understand, or maybe don't want to admit, that their emotional boundaries are not so secure when you're near, that you've become the exception in a world where they thought they were immune. And here's what most people don't understand. When someone is melting inside, it doesn't always look like affection. Sometimes it looks like avoidance. Sometimes it's over-talking or shutting down. Sometimes it's defensiveness. Because melting inside doesn't just mean I like you. It means I don't know how to handle how much I'm drawn to you. It's a conflict. A silent storm behind their eyes. They might laugh more than usual around you, not because everything is funny, but because laughter is a safe emotional release. They might find excuses to touch something near you or touch you lightly in conversation because physical proximity feels like home. And in a world that can be cold and isolating, that warmth is magnetic, but terrifying. You may notice them remembering details you mentioned in passing, things you don't even remember saying. Why? Because you're not just background noise to them. You are a frequency they've tuned into without realizing it. And once someone is locked in like that, their whole nervous system is working overtime just to appear normal around you. Sometimes they'll pull away, not because you've done anything wrong, but because being around you intensifies everything they've worked hard to suppress. Emotions they didn't plan to feel, needs they thought they had outgrown. You don't just attract them, you challenge them. You demand authenticity without asking for it. That's why they melt. Because realness is rare and it's overwhelming when it's finally found. And you might be tempted to ignore these signs, to dismiss what you see as imagination or coincidence. But be careful. Some of the greatest connections you'll ever experience don't begin with grand confessions. They begin with small collapses, with eyes that linger a little too long, with breath that catches for no reason, with conversations that veer into unexpected vulnerability. These are not weak people. These are people whose emotional equilibrium is being disrupted by your presence. You are shaking the foundation of their composure, and not because you're trying to, but because authenticity always tests the walls of pretense. So don't be misled by cool tones and calculated replies. Stillness is not absence, it's containment. And when someone is melting inside, that containment is cracking at the seams. The human soul is not built to remain guarded forever. At some point it needs to be seen. And when that moment comes, when you walk into the room and their entire demeanor shifts, when they soften or harden or seem suddenly unsettled, that is the sign you've struck a nerve. You've touched a place they forgot existed. Maybe they're not ready to admit it. Maybe they never will. But you've become the exception, not the rule. And exceptions change everything. Because melting is not just about attraction, it's about transformation. It's about a part of them thawing out that was once frozen by fear or failure or time. And you're the heat, the catalyst, the trigger for that change. So don't underestimate your presence. Don't overlook what silence reveals. The eyes, the breath, the shift in energy. Those are the signs of an inner world responding to you. Melting isn't weakness, it's surrender. Not to you, but to a truth they can no longer deny. You matter. And their soul knows it before their mind ever does. They say the eyes are the window to the soul, but most people don't realize just how much the human face betrays the truth. We've been taught to hide how we feel, to suppress the raw, unfiltered emotions that ripple through our nervous system. But no matter how hard someone tries to conceal it, the body has a way of speaking when the mind is busy pretending. This is especially true in those fleeting, uncontrollable facial expressions, those small shifts in the eyes, the mouth, the muscles around the eyebrows. They last only a second or two, sometimes even less. But if you know what to look for, those brief flashes will tell you more about how someone feels than any words ever could. And when someone melts inside because of your presence, the first signs are always there, right in their face. You can walk into a room and say nothing. You can be dressed in the simplest clothes, speak with the softest voice, and still command a shift in energy that no one acknowledges, but everyone feels. And among the people in that space, there may be one person whose entire nervous system wakes up when they see you. They don't say it. They may not even know it themselves. But the signs are there. Watch their face. There's a subtle transformation that happens when you walk by. The pupils dilate slightly. Their eyes might flicker with a kind of warmth, a softness that wasn't there a moment ago. The corners of their mouth twitch as though a smile is trying to escape but hasn't been given permission. These are not rehearsed gestures. They're reflexes. Pure, unguarded, emotional impulses. What makes micro expressions so telling is that they bypass conscious control. You can fake a laugh, you can force a smile, but you can't fake the way your eyes soften when you're emotionally disarmed. You can't rehearse the look of longing or the subtle wideness of surprise mixed with admiration. Those are real. They slip out before the person even knows what they're feeling, and when they realize what just happened, they'll often try to shut it down. They'll look away quickly, touch their face, adjust their posture, anything to regain control. But the moment has already spoken, and you saw it. It's the power of emotional vulnerability. It isn't loud. It doesn't always come with confessions or grand gestures. Sometimes it's just that flicker of warmth that vanishes as quickly as it came. Sometimes it's the sudden breath someone takes when you make eye contact, or the way their jaw loosens just a bit when they hear your voice. These aren't random. These are signs that something deeper is stirring inside them, something they didn't expect and might not be ready to admit. You see, when a person is emotionally guarded, they operate on a script. They know how to control their tone, their words, their body language. But your presence disrupts that pattern. You introduce an emotional frequency that shakes loose the structure they've spent years perfecting. And in that moment, when the mask slips, even briefly, you see the truth. You see that they are not indifferent. They are not unaffected. They are melting inside, even if they won't let it show for more than a second. And here's what makes it more complicated. People often misinterpret these micro-expressions. They assume that unless someone openly admits their feelings, those feelings aren't real. But that's a mistake. The deepest emotions don't always show up in dramatic form. They leak out in moments, in glances, in silences that linger a little too long, in the way someone's entire face relaxes when you laugh, like hearing your joy brings them peace. These expressions, brief as they are loaded with meaning, and they don't lie. In fact, the more someone tries to suppress what they're feeling, the more these little signs become obvious. Because suppression is energy, and energy leaks. It finds cracks in the surface and escapes. That's why you might see a flash of affection before someone pulls back and hardens their face again. It's not that the emotion vanished, it's that they're fighting it. But the battle itself is proof that something powerful is there. When someone is melting inside because of you, their whole face becomes conflicted. Part of them wants to hold it together to stay composed and unaffected. But another part, the deeper, more instinctual part, wants to surrender, wants to let the truth out. That truth surfaces in tiny, involuntary expressions that speak louder than any speech ever could. And you don't need to call it out. You don't need to confront them or make them explain. Just observe, honor the moment. Because in that split second, when they look at you like they've forgotten how to breathe, when their expression softens like they've found something safe, something sacred, you are witnessing something rare. You are seeing a guarded soul temporarily unguarded, not because you forced it, but because your presence made it impossible for them to keep pretending. This is not manipulation, this is not seduction, this is awareness. This is the understanding that emotional truth is always there, beneath the surface, waiting to be seen. And when someone shows you that truth, even for a moment, you owe it to both of you to recognize it. So pay attention, not to the words, but to the expressions that words cannot contain. Pay attention to the way someone's face changes when you enter the room, the way their eyes light up or soften, the way they seem to forget themselves for a second. That's not imagination. That's not projection. That's emotional transparency, a brief surrender to something they feel but can't yet say. And that surrender, no matter how fleeting, is the beginning of something real. Because when someone melts inside when you're near, they're not showing weakness. They're showing humanity. They're showing the part of themselves they usually hide from the world. And if you're the one who brings that part to the surface, even without trying, you're not just in their life, you're in their heart's blind spot. The one place they never expected anyone to reach. There's a difference between calm and control. One is natural, the other is effortful. When someone is truly at peace, you can feel it in the way they speak, the way they move, the way they occupy space without tension. But when someone is trying to hold themselves together, when they're working overtime to maintain composure, you can see it too if you look closely. That unstable composure is one of the clearest signs that something deeper is happening beneath the surface. And when you're near, if someone begins to appear too controlled or suddenly nervous, it's rarely just social awkwardness. More often than not, it's a subtle signal that you're stirring something within them they weren't prepared to confront. You might notice their speech becomes overly deliberate, like every word is being measured. They might overthink what to say or hesitate when responding, as if they're trying to keep themselves from saying too much. Sometimes they fidget with objects, keys, pens, a glass, anything to keep their hands busy and give themselves something to focus on, other than the emotional pressure you represent. Other times they might fall completely silent, not because they have nothing to say, but because what they want to say feels too vulnerable. That silence isn't empty, it's full full of tension, full of meaning, full of things left unsaid. When someone is melting on the inside, their body often betrays them before their words do. They might shift in their seat, avoid eye contact, or suddenly stand straighter, as if trying to physically reassert control over the conversation. The erratic behavior, the nervous laughter, the forced small talk, these are all attempts to manage an emotional storm they don't know how to articulate. You may even see them switch between overly serious and strangely playful in the same interaction. That unpredictability is the result of an internal tug of war between wanting to open up and being terrified of what that might mean. The truth is, the stronger the feelings, the harder some people work to conceal them, especially those who have been hurt before, especially those who have learned to equate emotional expression with danger. So when you enter the picture and suddenly bring feelings to the surface, feelings they thought they had locked away, they don't just react with warmth or affection. Sometimes they react with resistance, with confusion, with an overwhelming need to stay composed at all costs. But that very need for composure is where the truth lies. Think about it. Why would someone need to brace themselves around you unless something inside them feels exposed? Why the stiffness? Why the overly formal tone, the distant body language, the abrupt changes in demeanor? Because your presence isn't just a social interaction, it's an emotional event. You're not just another person to them. You're someone who challenges the wall they've built to keep feelings at bay. And it's not always the shy or quiet ones who do this. Sometimes the most confident people, those who usually command attention and speak with ease, are the ones who fall apart the most subtly. They might keep their voice even, their posture perfect, their sentences articulate, but look closer and you'll notice a crack in the armor. Their words come a little too rehearsed. Their eyes flicker a little too fast. There's a disconnect between their outer behavior and their inner state. They're holding back, not because they don't feel, but because they feel too much. People who are emotionally overwhelmed often default to control. It's their safety mechanism. When they feel themselves slipping, whether into attraction, admiration, or something deeper, they grab hold of routine, structure, logic. They try to intellectualize the moment. They distance themselves with questions, jokes, or changes in topic. But if you stay quiet long enough, if you stay present without pushing, you'll see it. You'll see the way their composure isn't real serenity. It's a performance for your sake, or perhaps for their own, to avoid admitting what they don't want to feel. There's courage in silence, but there's also fear. And when someone is silently melting, that fear is palpable. They might appear cool on the outside, but inside they're negotiating with themselves, fighting the urge to lean in, fighting the desire to let you in, because doing so would mean surrendering control, and control is all they've known. That instability, the way they shift between closeness and distance, openness and withdrawal, is emotional conflict in its rawest form. It's the mark of someone trying to make sense of what you mean to them without losing the ground beneath their feet. And sometimes that battle is invisible to everyone but you, because you're the one who triggered it. Not by doing anything manipulative or flashy, but simply by being real, by showing up with an energy that feels disarming, by being someone they can't quite categorize or prepare for. So, if you find yourself speaking to someone who seems overly formal, strangely distant, or inconsistently engaged when they're usually more relaxed, don't be so quick to assume disinterest. Sometimes the people who pull back the hardest are the ones who feel the most. Sometimes the effort to remain unaffected is the clearest sign of how deeply they're affected. And you don't have to confront them. You don't need to ask for explanations or chase confessions. Just stay grounded, stay observant. Know that unstable composure is not a rejection, it's a reaction. a response to something powerful awakening inside them. That trembling balance between control and collapse is not a weakness, it's a signal. A sign that something in you is challenging something in them. Because melting doesn't always look like surrender. Sometimes it looks like someone trying not to fall apart in the presence of something they've secretly longed for. When someone can't seem to stay away from you, when they appear in your life repeatedly without any real reason or necessity, that's not a coincidence. It's emotional gravity. It's the unconscious pulling them in, often against their better judgment, against their own narratives, and sometimes even against their logic. People who are melting inside don't always know how to express it, especially if they're not ready to face what it means, but their actions, especially their presence, speak louder than anything they could say. You'll see it in how they show up, not dramatically, not always with purpose, but consistently, subtly, unexplainably. You might notice them offering to help when they don't need to. You might find them circling around in conversation, reaching out for small things, just checking in, thought of you when I saw this, or figured I'd ask you. The reason doesn't matter. What matters is the repetition, the frequency, the slow build of connection that doesn't seem to make practical sense but continues nonetheless. That's what happens when someone is trying to rationalize emotions they can't contain. They don't have a conscious strategy, but they keep returning because you represent something they're emotionally tied to, even if they can't name it. People often assume emotional intensity looks like passion, like vulnerability, like confession. But that's not how it starts. It begins with presence, with the inability to stay away, with decisions made for no clear reason other than an internal pull. Their heart is already responding, even if their mind is still trying to sort it out. That's why they come back. That's why they linger. That's why they look for excuses to be in your space, even if the world tells them they shouldn't. And often, they don't even know why they're doing it. If you ask them directly, they'd probably stumble over their words or give you a vague answer. Not because they're hiding something, but because they genuinely don't have the language for what they're experiencing. They just feel safer around you, calmer, more alive. Something in you resonates with something deep in them, and even though they might fight it, they can't seem to stop themselves from showing up again and again. Sometimes this presence takes the form of direct interaction. Other times it's more indirect. You might notice them liking your posts, reacting to your stories, finding small ways to remind you they exist in your orbit. It's not always loud, but it's consistent. They don't want to lose that connection, even if they're not ready to deepen it. That's emotional conflict at play. They're trying to manage feelings that don't follow rules. And the truth is, people are rarely honest with themselves at first, especially when emotions disrupt the plans they had for their life. When you come into the picture, you may represent something they thought they weren't looking for. Maybe they're already involved with someone. Maybe they've sworn off relationships. Maybe they've convinced themselves they're not capable of feeling deeply again. And then you appear. You don't demand anything. You don't push. But your presence makes them feel something different, something more real than what they've been clinging to. And that destabilizes their whole system. So what do? They hover. They circle. They stay near but not too close. They act like it's all casual, but their behavior gives them away. Their excuses to see you grow more frequent. Their interactions become layered, full of meaning disguised as small talk. They say things that sound ordinary but carry weight if you're really listening. Because emotional melting doesn't come with fanfare. It comes with repetition. It comes with presence. It comes with that silent question that never gets asked but is always there. Why do I feel drawn to you? You'll feel it in their timing, in the way they reach out at moments that somehow matter, in the way they pick up on things you never expected them to remember. They don't always understand what's happening. They just know they can't walk away. Even if they try, they circle back, sometimes after days, sometimes after weeks, but they return. And each time they do, it's less about convenience and more about emotional necessity. The thing about melting is that it rarely looks like collapse from the outside. It looks like repetition, like subtle pursuit, like being present in someone's life without having a clear reason. And that kind of behavior doesn't come from indifference. It comes from emotional pull, from the subconscious realization that someone means more than you're ready to admit. And what's important for you to understand is this: you're not imagining it. When someone keeps showing up, when they remain in your world without being asked, it's because something about your energy, your spirit, your very presence is affecting them. They feel grounded near you, or inspired, or unsettled in a way that forces growth. Whatever it is, it pulls them in. That pull is not superficial, it's emotional. And the more they try to explain it away, the more powerful it becomes. Sometimes they'll try to convince themselves it's nothing, just friendliness, just coincidence, but their actions don't lie. People don't keep returning to places where they feel nothing. They don't keep finding reasons to engage unless something inside them is seeking connection. That emotional magnetism is real. It's not fantasy, it's not manipulation. It's chemistry, meeting vulnerability, two forces that, once combined, are hard to resist. So watch how they behave. Watch how often they enter your space without being invited, how often they stay longer than necessary, how their eyes linger, how their words slow down when they speak to you. These are not random events, they're patterns. Patterns rooted in something they feel deeply but haven't fully processed. When someone's presence becomes a habit, it's a sign that their emotional boundaries are shifting. You've moved from the background of their life to the center of their attention, and they may not know how to handle it. But the fact that they keep coming back, that they remain present, speaks volumes. You've made an impact. One they can't undo, one they probably don't want to, even if they're afraid to say it out loud. There is something unmistakably revealing about the way people look at you when they think you're not watching. That moment of unfiltered attention, where no masks are worn and no performances are given, tells you everything you need to know about what they truly feel. It's not the kind of gaze you encounter in daily conversation or polite interaction. It's the one that lingers just a second too long, the one that looks at you like you're something rare, something they can't quite believe is real. And when someone is melting inside because of you, that look, the one they think goes unnoticed, is where the truth hides. This is not about lust. It's not about the hungry stares of someone who simply wants you physically. It's deeper. It's a kind of reverence, a gaze that holds a question, a fear, and a longing all at once. It's how a person looks when they feel emotionally unguarded in your presence, when they know they're affected by you but don't yet know how to handle it. Their eyes linger, sometimes unconsciously, not just on your appearance, but on your expressions, your gestures, your laugh. It's as though they're studying you, trying to hold on to the moment, trying to understand what exactly you've triggered in them. They may try to look away quickly once you catch them. They might shift in their seat, pretend to check their phone, act as though they weren't looking at all. But it's too late. That glance was real. The timing, the intensity, the stillness in their face when their eyes found you. It wasn't accidental. It was instinctual. When someone is emotionally stirred by you, they observe you with a different kind of focus. They're not looking for flaws or judgments. They're searching for something. Maybe for safety. Maybe for clarity. maybe for connection. But whatever it is, it's drawing them in. And the eyes betray what the mouth refuses to say. And that's the strange thing about attraction born from emotional depth. It rarely announces itself. It doesn't always show up in confessions or romantic gestures. It lives in quiet, steady attention, in the way someone's face softens when you speak, in the way their gaze follows you across a room, in how they glance at you when you laugh, like your happiness has become something they need to witness. Sometimes they look at you like they're trying to memorize you, not because they expect you to leave, but because being near you feels rare, like a moment they don't want to forget. That gaze carries weight. It's not casual. It's full of emotional friction. You can feel the hesitation behind it, the internal debate between staying guarded and letting their emotions take over. That's why they look when they think you won't notice. Because in that moment, there are no consequences, no explanations needed. It's the only time they allow themselves to feel it without fear of being exposed. But here's the truth. They already are exposed. That kind of gaze is not something you can hide forever. You might not call it out. You might pretend you didn't see it. But deep down, you recognize what it means. You can feel the weight of their silence. You can sense that something important is happening behind their eyes, something fragile and unsure. People don't stare like that when they're indifferent. They don't get lost in someone's presence when they feel nothing. That kind of gaze, the one that holds without asking permission, is always rooted in emotional vulnerability. It's the look of someone who's conflicted, someone who feels drawn in, even as they try to keep a safe distance. It's how someone looks at a person who's quietly shaking the ground beneath their emotional defenses. And often, they won't say a word. They'll continue to act like everything is normal. They'll laugh, talk, maybe even flirt casually. But that look will return when they think you're distracted, when they assume you're focused on something else. They'll watch you, not with judgment, but with a kind of quiet awe. That's when you know they're melting inside. Because emotions that strong don't just fade into the background. They find their way through the eyes. They express themselves in stillness, in silence, in presence. And if you're honest with yourself, you've probably felt it too. The tension in the room when their eyes meet yours. The electric quiet that follows. The unspoken words carried between glances. That is emotional exposure. That is what it looks like when someone's internal world is being stirred in your presence. You don't need to chase validation when you see this. You don't need to ask for confirmation. The look is the confirmation. Because people may lie with their mouths, but they rarely lie with their eyes. And when the gaze carries softness, conflict, fear, and hope all at once, it tells you that what they feel is not casual. It's significant, even if they're not ready to act on it, even if they're trying to deny it. So don't underestimate that glance across the room. Don't dismiss the way their eyes light up when they catch sight of you. That's not performance. That's not manners. That's not politeness. That's emotional reality breaking through. That's someone showing their truth in the only way they feel safe doing so. And you don't need to confront them. You don't need to interpret it out loud. Just see it, acknowledge it internally. Because that moment when their guard slips and the eyes tell the story is rare. It's raw and it's real. It's a quiet confession from a soul that hasn't found the words yet. And if you can see that look for what it is, you'll understand something most people miss. That sometimes The deepest feelings are spoken in silence, seen only in the fleeting gaze of someone who's already feeling too much.